What are the worst type combinations in Pokemon? Let's find out right now. I've put together a top 10 list ranking these type combinations from least horrible to most horrible. I will only include type combinations that actually exist in the games, so no theoretically terrible ones like Ice Normal or Ice Bug. Let's get into it. At number 10 on the list, I have the Psychic Ghost typing. As a Psychic Ghost type, you are ×4 weak to two of the most common attacking types in the game in modern Pokemon, those being Dark and Ghost, which is absolutely atrocious. This is a great example of a very non-synergistic typing, because both Ghost and Psychic are weak to the same types, those being Ghost and Dark. So when you stack them together, you're even more weak to those types, and adding Psychic to Ghost provides extremely little benefit. It amplifies both of these weaknesses, and all it really offers is a resistance to Psychic. The fighting resistance that comes with Psychic is useless when Ghost is already immune to fighting in the first place. So these typings are just as non-complementary as you can get. The Psychic Ghost typing sort of reminds me of the durian pizza from Chinese Pizza Hut. These are just two things that should never be put together. There's no synergy whatsoever. What's also funny is that the Psychic type erases a bug resistance, because Psychic is weak to bug. So now you're only neutral to bug, where a Mono Ghost type would be resistant to bug, which is actually quite important since U-turn is such a common move. All that being said, I'm still ranking this as the least horrible of all of these horrible type combinations, because at least you're only weak to 2 types. That's not that many types to be weak to, and even though they're very common weaknesses, very bad weaknesses, and they're ×4 weaknesses, there's only 2 of them, so it could be worse. And Ghost typing is so good on its own that you can sort of manage with this typing. There are literally examples of viable Psychic Ghost types. 2 very powerful legendaries have this typing, Lunala and Calyrex Shadow Rider, and they get by well enough. The typing does not pull them down to hell or anything with them. It may be worse than just a Mono Ghost typing in many ways, but it's still workable. And also there is a little bit of offensive synergy when you consider that Psychic typing gives you access to Stab Psy Shock, which is a special attack that hits the enemy based on their defense stat rather than their special defense stat. This is sort of useful to have on a Ghost type special attacker, because it allows you to hit special walls for good damage. And having this option is decently complementary to a Shadow Ball or other Ghost stab that you might have access to. So at least the Psychic typing offers stab damage on a pretty good move for special attackers that allows them to do something to special walls. Certainly not worth the terrible ×4 weaknesses overall. I'd probably rather just have a Mono Ghost typing, but still, it's not nothing, and the typing is more workable than some of the other typings we're going to talk about. Up next is the Rock Steel typing. Another example of a typing that is very non-complementary. Steel by itself is one of the strongest types in the game. When you add Rock to it, you unfortunately stack a lot of weaknesses. A Rock Steel typing is ×4 weak to fighting and ground type attacks, and also weak to water type attacks. These are really bad types to be weak to on a type combination that often leans into a physically defensive role, because a lot of physical attackers have fighting type attacks and ground type attacks. I would say that most physical attackers in the game want to carry a fighting type attack or a ground type attack of some sort. These often form a strong offensive combination or even the main stab damage of top physical attackers. So to be weak ×4 to these 2 types in particular is dreadful. And the water weakness on top of that is also not very nice. Another extremely common attacking type. It is a little bit weird to rank this as worse than Psychic Ghost typing, since the Rock Steel typing at least has a lot of resistances. With this typing you are resistant to Bug, Dragon, Fairy, Flying, Ice, Normal, Psychic, and Rock. You are also immune to Poison. And these are good traits, of course. But I think the difference is that the Psychic Ghost typing leans more towards offense, and therefore the ×4 weaknesses you have don't feel as bad. Often Mono Ghost types just die to those attacks anyway in one hit. So it results in that typing feeling more overcomable, whereas this typing is usually on a defensive Pokemon. And there are many, many examples of Rock Steel types with pretty good stats that are just not very viable due to the terrible detriments of these particular weaknesses, bringing them down so much and making them bad at what the typing seems to be good for, if that makes sense. Offensively, this typing is also not great, so you couldn't really lean into the offensive side of it either. Steel is primarily a defensive type in Pokemon. Offensively, it's not that amazing. Rock is a good offensive type, but it's not very complementary to Steel. Rock typing here provides extremely little. The best thing it provides is that you're now neutral to Fire, where Steel would be weak to it. That's something. And also, Rock type provides a ×4 resistance now to Flying and Normal, where Mono Steel just had a regular resistance. But I would say those two resistances have diminishing returns. The regular resistance is good enough in most cases. And the detriments of the Rock type, stacking weaknesses to Fighting and Ground and adding a Water weakness, are just so atrocious that it is not worth it at all. The offensive benefits are also marginal. I mean, Pokemon like Bastiodon and Probopass and Stakataka all have quite good stats, but this typing holds them back so much that none of them are close to OU viability. The typing is such a detriment. I think that says a lot about the drawbacks of this typing. Of course, there are worse typings to come, and the Steel typing itself is doing incredible heavy lifting here to not make this truly hellish typing, because Steel typing offers all those resistances and the poison immunity. Up next is the Ice-Steel typing. Ice-Steel typing is very similar to Rock-Steel typing. When you combine a primarily offensive type with a primarily defensive one, especially when they share weaknesses, the results are not ideal. With an Ice-Steel typing, you are ×4 weak to Fighting and Fire, and also weak to Ground. And I would say these weaknesses are even worse than those of the Rock-Steel typing. At least the Rock-Steel typing is neutral to Fire, but adding this ×4 Fire weakness into the equation is life-ruining. This is a rather dysfunctional type combination all around. Offensively, Ice and Steel are not that complementary. Both types are resisted by Water and Steel. They don't really cover each other's weaknesses. And that Fire weakness is such a problem. Fire is one of the most prominent coverage types, strong offensive types. It's everywhere. A Fire weakness is incredibly detrimental. I suppose this typing is better than just Mono Ice, but that's not saying much. It's still a completely horrible typing in all areas. We can look at Sand/Alola as a great showcase of the folly of this typing. It seems to be designed as a Pokemon that is both defensive and offensive, with a high defense stat and the Slush Rush ability and a strong attacking move pool. But in practice, Alola and Sandslash does not really achieve very much in any of these areas. I do think it can get much worse than this typing though. I think theoretically you could imagine a primarily offensively oriented Pokemon functioning with this typing. In Mono Ice types have functioned before off the offensive strength of Ice alone. So I suppose if a Pokemon's already frail, the defensive benefits that come with Steel typing would outweigh the shortcomings. But we've never seen such a Pokemon yet. The typing clearly has glaring flaws, of course, but it does get worse. Up next, I've got the Bug-Flying type combination, which is a very commonly seen type combination. A lot of Pokemon have this type combination, and it is very bad. As a Bug-Flying type, you are ×4 weak to Rock, which is terrible, especially because this carries with it a weakness to the Stealth Rock entry hazard, and you will take 50% of your HP upon switching in on a Stealth Rock, which is disastrous. But on top of this ×4 Rock weakness, you are also weak to Ice, Flying, Fire, and Electric. That's a lot of weaknesses. Your resistances are to Bug, Fighting, and Grass, and you have a ×4 resistance to Fighting and Grass, which is alright. But you really can't help but think that just a Mono Flying typing is so much better here. Bug offers very little offensively. It provides so many more weaknesses, and you're mostly stacking resistances on top of ones that you already had. Very little in the way of synergy between these two types. It is largely a straight-up downgrade to tack on Bug typing. That's often the case, to be honest, but particularly here. Bug-Flying types are almost exclusively low tier. There's like Yanmega, who is okay in some tiers, but I would say that's largely due to the strength of its abilities Tinted Lens and Speed Boost. It's almost in spite of its typing that it's any good, and the typing is the big thing holding it back from being OU proper. Absolutely terrible typing, but at least you are a Flying type, which means you're immune to Ground and immune to Spikes, Toxic Spike, Sticky Web. Flying typing is good and can do a lot of heavy lifting here, and also, at least from Gen 8 onwards, you can put on the heavy-duty boots, to overcome the weakness to Stealth Rock. That is in the game. That's something you can do. I do apologize to Mothim, who I know has a huge fan base. And I'm kind of putting myself at risk here by potentially insulting the Mothim Nation, who have a lot of cultural power. But I do apologize. The bug flying typing is a lower end typing in all of Pokemon. It's demonstrably very bad. And there are a few examples of Pokemon that can overcome it, and even saying they can overcome it is a bit of a stretch at the best of times. I'm deeply apologetic to Mothim. Up next we have the Ice Psychic type combination. Boy is this one non-desirable. It turns out when you take two of the worst types in the game and stack them together, it is not very desirable. This is not a good thing to do for your future. I wouldn't advise becoming an Ice Psychic type if you have a choice in the matter. The Ice Psychic typing is weak to Bug, Dark, Fire, Ghost, Rock, and Steel. 6 weaknesses, many of these common types. Rock weakness is one of the worst to have, as we've established, due to the Stealth Rock existing, and if you're weak to Rock, you take more from Stealth Rock. I suppose the Steel weakness is the most manageable of all these weaknesses, but Bug, Dark, Fire, and Ghost are all very common attacking types that are terrible to be weak to. And the typing is just so non-synergistic, truly. You're really just stacking all your weaknesses for no benefit. The only real benefit you get here is that at least you are neutral to fighting now, because Psychic has a fighting resistance, which cancels out the Ice being weak to fighting, but truly a marginal benefit when you consider all the downsides. Resistance-wise, you have barely anything. You are only resistant to Ice and Psychic, your own types, ironically. You are only resistant to your own self. So you take massive neutral damage from just about everything. You are weak to half the game, with very little to show for it. When you look at a Pokemon like Mr. Rhyme, you can't help but think there is not much rhyme or reason to its existence in the first place. This Pokemon achieves extremely little, largely due to the typing being so very detrimental to it. But hey, at least this is a type combination without any times for weaknesses. There's not much to be thankful for if you are Mr. Rhyme, but I suppose if you are to be thankful for anything, it's that. And we must all count our blessings, even if they are few. Up next, I have the Bug Psychic typing. With this typing, you have an impressive 6 weaknesses as well, to Bug, Dark, Fire, Flying, Ghost, and Rock. I don't believe that these two typings complement each other defensively at all. I don't think that one typing negates any weakness of the other. They seem to just be completely terrible and are mutually dragging one another down into the depths of hell. These weaknesses are all atrocious, of course, especially Rock. The flying weakness doesn't help at all. I will say that there are some okay resistances here when compared to the Ice Psychic typing, and those are a times-4 fighting resistance, which is something, a ground resistance, which is appreciated, and also a grass and psychic resistance. But I really think these are marginal benefits when you consider all the weaknesses you have, and I would say this is even worse than the Ice Psychic typing, because at least Ice is a good offensive type. At least you have some offensive firepower to show for your pathetic existence, but Bug is a really bad offensive type. It's resisted by half the damn game. And Psychic is a pretty bad offensive type too, with Dark being so common and that being completely immune. These two types are just terrible, both offensively and defensively. They're non-complementary in both areas. They're just stacking disadvantage after disadvantage and providing nothing for one another. The only good thing I can say about this is once again the fact that at least they're not times-4 weak to anything, but I don't know if that's very much of a comfort for Orbeetle, who lives in complete distress and always has since it was brought into existence. It's a cruel fate to not only be an orb-based beetle, which makes you a target for ridicule among your peers, but also the fact that you are a Bug Psychic. With all that intelligence and psychic ability to rise above your Bug counterparts, all that this brings you is despair with the self-awareness that you are absolutely under fire from everything that exists. Simply coming into contact with a bird will end your existence instantaneously. At least Spidops or somebody is a mere monobug and does not have the self-awareness to be filled with such despair at its disadvantages, and it can be blissfully ignorant, but Orbeetle here is filled with untold torment at the low quality of its own typing. This is a curse I would not wish upon anybody. Up next we have the Bug Ice type combination. a famously terrible one. As a bug ice type, you are times 4 weak to fire and rock. Rock is of course one of the worst types to be weak to. And on top of that, you are also weak to flying and steel. With 4 weaknesses, 2 of them times 4 weaknesses, and 1 of them a rock weakness, which comes with it the vulnerability to stealth rock. Pretty horrible. As for resistances, you're resistant to 3 types: grass, ground, and ice. I suppose you can be thankful that the bug typing here erases your weakness to fighting, so you're at least neutral to fighting, where you would otherwise be weak to it as a mono ice type. But apart from that, this is a typing that stacks a lot of very, very unfortunate weaknesses with marginal benefit, really. Bug, offensively speaking, is one of the worst types in the game, providing no real offensive synergy to the ice type. Both of them already hit grass super effectively. I suppose Bug hits some things neutrally and hits dark types and psychic types, but Bug typing is not providing much at all, offensively speaking, in this combination. The only ice bug type that's fully evolved is Frostmoth, who is a great example of why the typing is such a detriment. Frostmoth actually has one of the strongest abilities in the game, Ice Scales, which means it receives half damage from all special attacks. And this insane god tier ability is not enough for Frostmoth to be any good, because the typing is that bad. Even though you're taking half damage from special attacks, the weakness to fire is such a problem that it basically erases that benefit. You don't have enough resistances, and even though you have technically less weaknesses than some of the previous mentioned types like Ice Psychic and Bug Psychic, I think that the 2 times 4 weaknesses and the very few resistances are enough to outweigh that and result in this typing being even worse. Now, some might have expected this typing to be even higher on the list as perhaps the worst typing in the game, but I do think there are still worse typings to come. At least you're an ice type, which is good offensively. At least you're neutral to fighting. At least you are not totally dysfunctional, I suppose. I mean, Frostmoth is pretty dysfunctional. It's PU ranked, but there was an OU team that used it once. This happened once in history. It's good in PU. That's more than can be said for some of these Pokemon, and in some ways having a times 4 weakness to rock makes heavy duty boots more justifiable, and therefore sort of diminishes the rock weakness as a problem because you're just immune to stealth rock. I am grasping at straws to come up with positives for this typing, but that is something. You can justify boots more and they have more of a benefit to you. They solve a huge problem for you. But yes, this is among the worst type combinations you can get for certain. There's no denying that. Up next is the Grass Ice type combination, which yes, I do think is worse than Bug Ice. No, that sounds crazy. I think it's worse. The Grass Ice type combination has 1 times 4 weakness to fire. Terrible weakness to have, of course. That's probably the worst thing about it, but there's more to come in terms of poor fortune. Because with this typing, you have a total of 7 weaknesses. Not only that times 4 fire weakness, but also a weakness to bug, fighting, flying, poison, rock, and steel. Goodness gracious. 7 weaknesses is unbelievable. That's too many weaknesses. A Pokemon shouldn't be allowed to have that many weaknesses, I think. That's just unfortunate. Or at least the poison and steel weaknesses are more manageable, but every other weakness is horrendous. This typing also has 4 resistances to electric, grass, ground, and water, which is okay, and grass types are also immune to powder moves, which is something. But overall, of course, a really bad type combination. I never thought of this as that bad of a type combo because of Abomasnow existing. Abomasnow in my head is a good Pokemon, but I think this is an antiquated way to view the world, because when you really think about it, Abomasnow is actually quite horrid. The only real good thing about Abomasnow was that it's the only hail setter in the game in early generations, and therefore it does something, but this Pokemon has always been held back by its horrible typing. Always. It has such a target on its back. Stealth Rock weakness is such a problem. It's weak to half the damn game. At least Abomasnow can sort of switch in on some Pokemon like a bulky ground type that doesn't have probably fire coverage or flying coverage. It's pretty common for ground types specifically to not have coverage to hit Abomasnow, but that's not even true because Garchomp can carry Fire Blast. Excadrill has Iron Head. 7 weaknesses, just crazy. It's truly insane. I think any other Pokemon with this typing besides Abomasnow would be complete garbage. It would be out of the question for them to be anywhere near viable. Abomasnow is hard carried by its Snow Warning ability, in spite of its dreadful typing. And even now, of course, although the Ninetales is better, even the Ice Cream Cone. outclasses a Bomber Snow in the marketplace, which I think says a lot about the society that we live in. At least there's a bit of offensive synergy for grass and ice, because grass hits water super effectively, which ice cannot. But there is also some unfortunate overlap where they both super effectively hit ground, meaning they sort of cancel each other out. There is more offensive synergy here with the types than some other typings mentioned in the video, at least. So that's alright. But I would overall say this is a worse typing than Bug Ice. Even though there are some benefits like the powder immunity and grass being a little bit better offensively than Bug is, I think the sheer amount of weaknesses is too much. And also having a fighting weakness where Bug Ice does not have a fighting weakness is a pretty big problem. Fighting is a bad weakness to have. Up next, I have gone with the Rock Ice type combination, which I didn't think I would rank this high in the world of horrible type combinations. But I think it's true. And I think it's unfortunate that it's true, but it is. The Rock-Ice type combination is truly horrendous in all arenas. As a Rock-Ice type, you have 6 weaknesses, 2 of them being ×4 weaknesses to fighting and steel. On top of that, you are weak to grass, ground, rock, and water. Goodness gracious. I feel as if with a Rock-Ice typing, it is very rare for you not to be weak to an offensive Pokemon. All of these types are insanely common, and often used together. I suppose the ×4 steel weakness is a little bit more manageable than the other ones, but it's still not great to have. But fighting weakness, as I just mentioned, is one of the worst weaknesses to have. It's such a common ingredient in offensive combinations. It's one of the most common attacking types generally, just a dreadful thing to be ×4 weak to. Ground weakness is never good to have. Ground is ubiquitous in competitive. Ground types are literally on every team, pretty much. So ground weakness sucks. Grass is a common ingredient in many coverage combinations. Water is everywhere. Rock is everywhere. Ground and rock are used together. What are you not weak to? It is so likely that an offensive Pokemon you're facing, no matter what they are, has one of these types as a coverage option. Your resistances are also not that relevant. You have a normal and poison resistance, which are just not very common types. It doesn't really matter that you're resistant to those. You're resistant to ice, which is good, flying, which is good, but surely if you're facing an ice or flying type, they have a coverage move of the types you are weak to. If you're a rock ice type, when do you defensively work against anything? I can scarcely imagine a scenario where a rock ice type actually switches in and doesn't die unless it's against a choice locked Pokemon locked into one of your very few resistances. In that case, you can thank your lucky stars that you actually managed to switch in against something and not perish, but there's insurmountable odds for a rock ice type to function defensively whatsoever. Offensively speaking, the benefits are also quite marginal. The only thing that rock typing really complements ice for is that you hit fire types super effectively, which is something I suppose, but rock and ice don't work very well together. They hit many of the same things. They are walled by many of the same things. But what they do achieve when together is that they stack all the weaknesses in the world. And you have a type combination that is really difficult to overcome. At least with a grass-ice type combination, you can actually wall some things. You're at least neutral to ice yourself. You have ground resistance, water resistance. You're resistant to some types that are common. You can switch in on a Pokemon that might have like water and ice as their offensive combination. It's pretty common for a Bomber Snow to get threatened by things due to all of its weaknesses, but I think that the weaknesses of Rock Ice type are just so much more pronounced and difficult to overcome. I can't even actually imagine something right now that Aurora switches in on and doesn't die to. I can't think of anything. And it's really quite a shame because I like Aurorus. I think it's a cool design, and it does sort of overcome its typing a little bit thanks to its ability Snow Warning, much like a Bomber Snow does. Setting snow or hail on the field has its merit in some contexts, but it is a serious uphill battle for these poor snow-setting Pokemon. I don't know why 2 of them have to have some of the worst typings ever, but that's what they decided to do. And Aurorus, despite looking like a powerful dinosaur creature that could defeat you in a battle, if you know even a little bit of martial arts, if you've been to a karate class or something and you learned how to do a judo chop, you will kill this giant beast in a single hit due to its ×4 fighting weakness. A simple judo chop will do the trick. It doesn't seem right, and it is not right. Frankly, it's not right at all that Aurorus is so vulnerable to a simple jab But that's the unfortunate reality that Game Freak has created. And some of you blame me for these things, and you think I am being rude to Aurorus. And I should be kinder to Aurorus, and not say that it's bad. But it wasn't me that made Aurorus. It wasn't me that stacked all the shortcomings on Aurorus. It was Game Freak, who lives up to his name in this context. What an absolute freakish thing to do to a beautiful Pokemon. It's a beautiful creature. And they've given it the Rock Ice typing, cursing it to a life of suffering and dread, with very little hope of overcoming its position. Very little hope. And before we get into number one, folks, I'd like to talk about some honorable mentions that almost made this list, but I decided against them. First, we have the normal Dark typing, which I almost included here, and I think is a very bad typing. This typing has a times 4 fighting weakness, weakness to Bug and Fairy, and only 1 resistance to Dark. And of course an immunity to Ghost and Psychic. What frustrates me about this typing is that it feels a little bit wasteful. Dark types are already resistant to Ghost, so the main benefit of normal typing, which is Ghost immunity, feels like it has diminishing returns here. It's nice to be immune to Ghost, but Dark type is already resistant to Ghost anyway, and the normal typing ends up stacking another fighting weakness on top, making you times 4 weak to fighting, which is one of the worst weaknesses you can have. So overall, I think that the cons outweigh the pros when it comes to normal Dark typing. But ultimately, I didn't think this quite made the list, even though it's quite a bad one, and a frustratingly non-synergistic one. Dark typing alone is very strong offensively, which makes up for this. You do have few weaknesses, and the immunities are still appreciated. And we've seen this be relatively functional on a Pokemon like Obstagoon, who is not too bad, and does at least have access to Stab Facade, as a benefit of its normal typing. So in that case, you can't really call this typing that horrible. It's relatively functional, I suppose. There is also the Ice-Flying type combination as another honorable mention here, which may have come to mind for many of you as a terrible type combination, deserving of the top 10. Pokemon like Delibird and Articuno are well known for being held back by this type combination. The type combination is very bad. The times 4 rock weakness is a big problem, and you're also weak to electric, fire, and steel. You have few resistances to only bug and grass. As a flying type, you're immune to ground and spikes, and various entry hazards. But the typing has more shortcomings than benefits, of course. But ultimately, I figured that this typing is actually not as horrible as it gets. I didn't think it quite made the top 10. Boots really fix a lot of problems here, erasing the Stealth Rock weakness. Ice Stab is actually good when you compare this to Bug Flying. The Bug typing is providing pretty much nothing for you while stacking weaknesses, but Ice Flying types do actually get the benefit of the offensive Ice Stab, which is genuinely valuable. And Articuno can sort of function alright, as an example, in lower tiers, as a defensive utility Pokemon with boots on. It's a very limiting typing. I can't imagine a Pokemon being OU with this typing or anything, but I think there are just worse typings than it. Flying is a good type on its own that carries here, that ground immunity and hazard immunity is very valuable, and Ice, even though it's mostly a detriment, is not totally useless here either. It's a good offensive type at least, and actually erasing the ice weakness that Flying usually has is something. You're neutral to ice, so there's some benefit there. And then we have the Rock Psychic typing, and this one was the closest to making it on their list. The Rock Psychic typing is very bad, with 7 weaknesses to Bug, Dark, Ghost, Grass, Ground, Steel, and Water. Goodness me, that's a lot of weaknesses. A lot of terrible weaknesses. You're at least neutral to fighting, but you're weak to half the universe. You have some resistances as well. Fire, Flying, Normal, Poison, and Psychic resistance. Definitely a bad typing, but I suppose the existence of Iron Boulder is showing that this type can sort of work offensively on the right Pokemon. And Iron Boulder is not amazing in OU or anything, but it's usable, and it can at least hit the field on a good resistance, like a fire or flying attack, and then output some offense from there. It's at least not times 4 weak to anything, leaving it completely wide open, so it can tank a super effective hit here and there, and not perish. Don't get me wrong, folks, this one was very close to making it. I just figured that the Psychic Ghost typing was a bit worse, in my opinion, and a bit more generally detrimental to have. at least fire and flying are good resistances, and you can leverage the switch in for some offense. That being said, you are weak to Sucker Punch and Shadow Snake, which diminish your offensive potency. That's a problem on Iron Boulder. At least the Psychic typing is assisting the Rock typing a little bit by erasing that fighting weakness, even though it provides some terrible Bug, Dark, and Ghost weaknesses on top. Oh, I don't know. It's pretty bad. Maybe on a different day this makes the list. Iron Boulder I consider to be a rolling stone that can't be stopped. A beautiful and artistic Pokemon. And so today, Iron Boulder, you've been spared of my ridicule and my vitriol, but you should not waste this courtesy I've granted you, Iron Boulder, because you were very close to being pointed and laughed at by everybody, and I want you to remember that, Iron Boulder. You were very close to scrutiny, and I hope you're thankful, I really do. And finally, folks, we reach the worst of the worst. Number 1 on my list of horrible type combinations. The worst type combination in the game, in my humble opinion. The Bug-Grass type combination. As a Bug-Grass type, you are weak ×4 to Fire and Flying, which are dreadful weaknesses to have. And on top of that, you are also weak to Bug, Ice, Poison, and Rock. 2 very relevant, very poor ×4 weaknesses on top of just a total of 6 weaknesses, mostly to extremely common attacking types. Bug type is everywhere thanks to the move U-turn. Ice is extraordinarily common in general as a coverage move, as a stab move if you can get it. Rock weakness is relevant, of course, with Stealth Rock all the time. It's a generally fairly common coverage option alongside ground type attacks. Poison is the most manageable weakness here, but even that is fairly commonly seen. Just a really horrendous defensive profile here. The worst in the game, I think. You at least have some resistances. You've got a resistance to electric, fighting, and water, and a ×4 resistance to ground and grass. But ultimately, these resistances aren't very impactful feeling when it is so incredibly likely for Pokemon using these attacking types to have complementary coverage of the other type. I mean, electric is commonly used with ice. Ground is commonly used with ice and rock. Bug grass types really can't afford to run the boots, so the rock weakness kills you here as you're repeatedly switching and dying to stealth rock damage. And offensively speaking, you have so little to offer. At least a rock ice typing means you are using 2 good offensive types, even though they're not that complementary. Rock and ice are both on their own good offensive types that have merit, especially ice. But bug and grass are really bad just by themselves. They're resisted by so many of the same things. Grass can be a good offensive type when paired with other types, but on its own, and especially alongside bug, it's pretty terrible. So as a bug grass type, you are just truly living the worst of both worlds, with very poor offensive attacking profile and very poor defensive profile as well. It is the worst type combination I think to have in the whole game, and it's on some of the worst Pokemon ever, like Wormadam and Leavanny. Leavanny can at least make sticky web and at least has chlorophyll and stuff, but the typing is just an absolute death sentence for it, truly. And it's a shame because thematically speaking, bugs, I mean, they live in the grass. This should be a typing that, in terms of harmonious cosmicity, would be a good typing. And if you're a bug in the grass, it sounds like you're doing what you were supposed to do as the universe dictates, but unfortunately, in a competitive context, they don't think so. They think that, in fact, you should defy your own nature and be like a bug steel type. That's a good typing. When you embrace technology and become a metallic life form, like in the film The Fly, and you fuse with metal, that's when you start to thrive in the world. But if you're just living in the grass as nature dictates, and as the universe dictates, you will be crushed under the terrible weight of reality and killed. And I'm sorry to Wormadam and kindly Pokemon like Leavanny, who's considered one of the kindest Pokemon. I believe it's said to create clothing out of silk to give to Pokemon in the cold weather or something like that. I think I read that in the Pokedex. Very kind Pokemon, an altruistic Pokemon that is unfortunately bogged down by the weight of the world, and unfortunately as well, it's the kindest among us that suffer the most sometimes. But once again, I must reiterate that I did not make the game. It's not my fault. It was the Game Freak who put these truths into our world, and we must reckon with them and accept them. Denial will only make it worse. Thank you for watching to the end of the video. You have been visited by the funny mouse, who is giving you a gift today. You have received the funny cheese from the funny mouse. All because you watched to the end. Thank you very much.